Most relationships in our world are built on the principle of submission. Even if people are in equal positions, they still try to follow the norms and rules acceptable to their partner, expecting them to do the same in return. But why are people inclined to fulfill requests and follow rules? What kinds of power exist, and why does an excess of power change people? Let's discuss this in the video, if you're into it. It's our psychology video. Subscribe to the channel and tell your friends about us. In psychology, there's no clear consensus on what submission really is. This allows some authors to view it as obedience, often linking it to personality traits. Based on this, researchers identify types of submission like compliance, external and internal conformity, suggestibility, and the adoption of social norms and ideals as one's own. However, this approach doesn't view submission as a distinct type of relationship with rules and norms used for self-discipline and self-regulation. But it's from this angle that submission plays a huge role in every person's life, starting from childhood. The presence of clear and reasonable rules serves as a guarantee of stability for a child's psyche, and thus security, while complete freedom, especially in critical situations, becomes a source of severe stress for a child, since they're not yet able to rely on their own views and decisions. As they grow up, every person acquires many new social roles, each with its own unwritten rules of behavior. For example, our first social role outside the family is that of a student at school. It implies the ability to listen to the teacher, follow the schedule, and complete assignments. In line with the goals set, following these rules contributes to a child's success as a student and reinforces their self-esteem. Further on, a person has to collect a whole set of such social roles: friend, sports team member, romantic partner, employee, candidate for a new position, and so on. Each time we encounter a new life situation, we enter it with a certain social role, and our success depends on how well we perform it. Psychologist Stanley Milgram's experiments show that by following the rules prescribed by social roles, most people are willing to perform even actions that contradict their values. Some social roles involve not submission but management of others, and interestingly, different people relate to them in polar opposite ways at times. Some categorically cannot stand the role of a leader and try their best to avoid any kind of power, most often due to a fear of responsibility and dealing with contradictions. However, there are also those who aren't intimidated by power at all and are even attracted to it, while sometimes the pursuit of power becomes critical and maniacal. Let's understand why this happens. In her works, psychoanalyst Karen Horney divided the pursuit of power into normative and neurotic. The normative pursuit is usually driven by noble motives: to improve work processes, make qualitative changes, and tackle ambitious tasks. Behind the neurotic pursuit, however, often lie attempts to compensate for feelings of inferiority due to physical imperfections, self-hatred, anxiety, and illnesses. According to Alfred Adler's theory, some people strive to compensate for their sense of inferiority through sexuality. However, Adler also singled out power as a way to compensate for and reinforce one's sense of self-worth. The feeling of a complete personality is shaped during adolescence. Every person goes through a complex process of separation and affirmation of their emotional independence from parents during this period, often manifested in emotional and behavioral rebellion. If this process is disrupted and the adolescent's rebellion is suppressed through an authoritarian parenting style, that inner sense of inferiority arises. Much later, the bottled-up inner rebellion and drive for self-affirmation burst out in an utterly unpredictable and sometimes pathological form of obsessive domination over others. Sometimes behind the neurotic pursuit of power lurks a deep-seated fear of loneliness, as Erich Fromm wrote in his theory of power. He believed that this very fear motivates people to become leaders and orators, and this drive to possess others' attention conceals a sadistic motive. Such people turn others into a function, force them to serve their interests, and exercise control, one of the most powerful forms of manipulation in human communication. We may not notice it, but human communication consists of manipulation, manifesting itself at all levels, from casual conversations with acquaintances to the values imposed on us by the media. The concepts of power, influence, and authority are often confused in everyday life. However, social and organizational psychology introduces strict distinctions between them. First, let's understand the definitions. Power is the totality of resources that enable some people to influence others' behavior. Having power implies that one person or group has the ability to force, compel, or induce others to think or act in a certain way. Influence is the relationship between people that allows one person, to a certain degree of probability, to make another change their behavior as the first person desires. To influence others' behavior effectively, you need to operate from a position of power. Authority is the right to use power to control the behavior of other people or groups. But what gives someone power? There are three main types identified. The first type is resource power. If one person possesses more of the resources needed by another, their influence will be much more significant. Such resources can include money, equipment, and any material valuables. The second type is position power, also known as formal authority. Beyond the formal permission to manage others that comes with position power, it also embodies the rules of interaction prescribed by social roles, and often the authority of the position extends beyond formal relationships. The third type is personal power. Many leaders known to us from history possess personal qualities deemed worthy of emulation by others. In this case, a person can compel those who recognize their outstanding qualities to act in accordance with their attitudes and views. The fourth type is expert power. A person will find it much easier to become a good leader if they are considered a renowned specialist in a particular field. This strict division of different sources of power is only relevant in theory. In real managerial practice, power is almost never based on a single source. Most often, all sources are present in varying proportions. Almost everyone has encountered examples confirming the notion that power corrupts people. And indeed, research has confirmed the impact of power on personal psychology. First, people vested with power begin to treat common norms with contempt. For example, Adam Galinsky found that powerful participants in an experiment were much more likely to turn off a fan annoying them than ordinary participants were. Most people also find it difficult to violate internal prohibitions, like cheating even when they want to. But someone who senses power and is in a privileged position more easily violates such prohibitions and acts in their self-interest. Second, power amplifies egocentrism, meaning a person places their needs above those of others. For instance, people earning less than $25,000 a year donate an average of 4.2% of their income to charity, while those making over $150,000 give only 2.7%. Recently, psychologists at Columbia University conducted an interesting experiment, assigning participants the roles of subordinate and boss. This was one trial in a series. Before beginning the game, they asked each participant to put together a set of candies and purchase it for themselves or another participant of their choosing. And here's what happened. The bosses bought far more candies for themselves than for the other person, whereas those relegated to subordinate roles in this game bought more for others than for themselves. These results suggest that people vested with power ascribe greater significance to themselves than to others. Of course, it's worth noting that all research and experimental results undergo averaging, and claiming that power can corrupt any person would be incorrect. Power does indeed liberate and amplify egocentrism, but the actions through which this manifests greatly depend on a person's personal qualities, level of empathy, and ability to plan for the long term.